Valve's latest CSGO map, Ancient, continues the trend of looking prettier and possibly demanding more powerful hardware than the older maps did. For some people this will be an inconvenience, and for others it might make the game literally unplayable. The same thing happened when Nuke was remade in 2016, and again when Cache was remade in 2019. The problem with this is that people whose PCs used to be able to run the game no longer can, which sucks for all those people out there chugging along on minimum spec systems. So I tested the map with a few PCs of mine. Technical details will be in this video's description so as to keep the video segment as accessible as I can. Last night, Ancient got an update. Some of this was to its gameplay, but there were a few graphical changes as well. Visually, I didn't see much of a difference. In some places a few props had been removed, but in others a few had been added. More were repositioned or resized, but the general feeling I got from these changes was that they were done to refine the look of the map, rather than to scale back on the visuals in a significant way. Fewer trees at T-spawn can be seen from middle, which I think was responsible for the bulk of the framerate increases that I saw. A few shrubs got removed from A, but they only improved framerates at low settings for me. Still, it's all moving in the right direction. But I warn you now that it didn't seem like too great an improvement overall. I don't think you can hold out hope of this latest update making the game playable for you if it wasn't already. I tested 21 different locations across the map, on a fast and slow PC of mine. And on average, at high settings, my slow PC was only 1% faster, and my good PC, 2% faster. A few sightlines here and there were maybe 5% better, but it wasn't anything great enough to make a noticeable improvement. But I saw greater improvements at low settings, which I suspect players will be running it at if they were struggling with the frame rates in the first place. My slow PC became 4% faster on average, and my fast PC 5%, which equated to about 20 FPS more. Which is nice, although it was sitting well above 300 FPS already. I'll show you the spots where the biggest improvements were felt. This sightline at T-spawn was 11 to 16% faster on low settings. This spot in middle was at least 4% faster on any setting that I tested. And this spot on A got about 8% faster when my PCs were on low settings. But how do these improvements compare with other maps from the game? I tested a few spots from Cache and Inferno to see how Ancient compared with them, and the results were surprising. Starting with my slow PC, a Ryzen 2200G, which is a 4-core CPU with integrated graphics, at high settings, Inferno ran at an average of 50 FPS. Obviously, you wouldn't want to play at these settings, but bear with me here. Cache was slower still, at just 43 FPS average. And Ancient was the slowest, at 40 FPS. So yes, Ancient is the slowest of the three maps, but not by much. I got 80% of the performance that I got from Inferno, which I think is a map that nobody has problems running. But at low settings and resolution, things changed a bit. Cache, for some reason, seems to be excellently optimised and ran 15% faster than Inferno when on low settings and resolution. It was fast enough to drive a 144Hz monitor, provided you stand in a few key spots on an empty server. And Ancient again is the slowest, averaging 117 FPS, which I still think is pretty good given that we're on integrated graphics from 2018. It's still 88% the speed that Inferno was, a map which came out 5 years ago now. So yes, you can argue that Ancient is harder to run than older maps are, but it's not by a dramatic amount. Now we'll move on to my fast PC, and the results were surprising. Ancient ran faster on this PC than Cache did on high settings. And when set to low settings, Ancient ran faster than Inferno or Cache did, and I was getting almost 400 FPS average on Ancient, so I can't complain about this new map at all. But despite all this, it's apparent that some people are still having problems with this map. I've seen complaints about stuttering, lagging when viewing certain props, graphical glitching and so on. If you are one of those people, then please post your system specs in the comments section, together with a description of the problems that you're having with the map. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Until I start seeing some patterns, I'm not even going to speculate about what the problem could be. In conclusion, on my slow PC, Ancient is a harder map to run than Inferno or Cache is, but it's still only 12 to 20% slower than Inferno, depending on the settings used. And on my fast PC, while it's roughly as demanding as the new Cache is at high settings, it's incredibly well optimised on lower settings, running much faster than the new Cache or even Inferno. I can't rule out there being problems for other people on other setups, but I can't complain about the performance that I'm getting on it. What is going on here? How can a newer, prettier map be running faster than Inferno? Well, Counter-Strike's a weird game. When the Nuke remake came out, I remember a very popular Reddit post pointing out how much was being drawn that didn't need to be, suspecting that this was the reason for the lower frame rates. And Jess Cliff responded to this, saying that the reason they're being drawn is because it actually improves frame rates for it to be rendered in this way. Drawing more in this instance resulted in a 40% average frame rate boost, but he did admit it seemed counterintuitive. Another example is the new cache, which FMPone has constructed almost entirely out of displacements. You'd think it would make sense to make flat walls out of a single brush, but displacements use dozens of polygons, being a tool designed for bumpy surfaces. But using them actually improves performance as well. The reason for all this is because the source engine is strange. It was designed in an era when the software and hardware was very different. The downside to this is that today, it isn't as optimized as it could be. But the benefit of its age has been to enable mastery of the engine. I think that Valve are better with it now than they were 5 years ago at squeezing as much out of it as they can. The features they've rolled out to the game in recent years, like the texture streaming and so on, might be better utilised in Ancient than they were in older maps such as Inferno. I don't know for sure. You can't just look at the map and say that it'll run slower than older maps do just because it appears to be more detailed and complex. Now, I certainly wasn't expecting it to run better than Inferno does when I was making this video, but here we are. I will admit the shortcomings of the test. I compared 21 spots in Ancient with only 7 in the older maps. For example, I chose 3 places in A on Ancient to benchmark, while for Cache and Inferno I picked just 1. So maybe the results I get are the general performance of Ancient compared with the worst case spots from Cache and Inferno. But I consider those two to be well optimised by this point, so any Counter-Strike player should know how their rigs perform in these maps already. I would like for other people to repeat this testing on their own systems, because they may get different results. But from what I've seen, I don't think Ancient deserves the reputation it's got of being a difficult map to run. From my perspective, as somebody who plays this game for all sorts of reasons, I welcome general graphical improvements, because I think they look nice, and they help modernise Counter-Strike, which is already hamstrung by an Ancient engine when compared with most other games out there. Just because a new map might run slower than the older ones do, it doesn't change the fact that the performance is still greatly beyond what you'll get from most competitive titles in this day and age. Of course, Counter-Strike is a competitive game, and performance should come first and foremost. But we're talking about the source engine here. Any half-decent PC from the last 10 years can get hundreds of frames per second out of this game. And with newer and faster hardware coming out every year, in a way, the game has never been easier to run than it is today. That being said, I do sympathise with players who are already running CSGO on minimum spec hardware. For them, they don't have 10% performance to spare. They might already be running the game at borderline unplayable frame rates. Maybe these players don't care about graphics at all, and just want to be able to keep playing the game that they've been playing for almost 10 years already. For some players, Ancient might be the map that forces them to stop playing the game.